Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the In the 11 podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show where we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. Stepping into the 11 this week is Kyle McLagan, currently in Iceland playing with Vikingur, and we talk about his whole career journey up to this point. Starting out as a younger player where didn't really get a lot of interest from big name clubs or from big colleges as he was looking to go the collegiate route, made his way onto a Division I soccer program and had a lot of success from an early stage, and then kind of found himself in a similar situation right after college where again there was not a lot of interest, was told no a lot, and had to forge a career for himself kind of in a different way, and chose Europe and Denmark and Iceland. And we talk about how he was able to make his dream into a reality. So it's a really great conversation, a really great episode, really insightful for those of you who might want to do something similar to Kyle. If you have aspirations of playing professionally overseas, I would definitely recommend staying tuned. So without further ado, I'll kick this over to myself and Kyle. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joined now by Kyle McLagan, a recent Icelandic Cup champion, I gather as well. What's it like to kind of come down off the high of that victory?
Oh man, it was not an easy task because we actually played the game on a Saturday. We
Mm,
celebrated Saturday night, but we had a game again on Wednesday, so it was a roller coaster because the highs of Saturday, we played 120 minutes and grinded out the win, but but then we turned around and get him played on Wednesday. So our coach was
yeah.
like, "All right, celebrate the win, enjoy it, but be ready for Wednesday." So it was it was an interesting thing. And I did not play on Wednesday as I kind of picked up a little injury in the cup, but we
Okay.
were not quite ready for Wednesday. I think still celebrating. So
Yeah. And I'm sure, signing the first professional contract, being an American that is now playing overseas, and we're going to dive into all that kind of in the episode today. But was that cup victory kind of one of the, highlights? What would you put that on the Mount Rushmore so far of your career up to this point?
yeah, I would say this season has been a season of highlights, to be honest.
Mm,
Champions League debut, Champions League goal, uh, UEFA Conference League, playing in front of 20,000 people in Poland, um, a cup final and like a win. We won the Super Cup as well. I didn't feel as though that was as much mine, obviously, because last year is when they won to qualify to get into that. So, yeah, I'd say it's up there, and this season is, like I said, it's just been full of uh, full of
yeah.
achievements and full of exciting things, exciting games.
Is there was there kind of like this was always what you knew was going to be kind of in your future for your career? Or is there a little bit of an element of like kind of pinching yourself sometimes, being like, wow, I'm playing in the Champions League, or I'm playing in front of 20,000 people?
It's everybody dreams of it, but for it to
Mm,
become an actual reality or a possibility is entirely different. um, because there are different routes you can take. Like I was playing in the first division in Denmark, which is the second tier, which is
mm-hmm.
a good level, good money, like professionally run league with quality players. But in these bigger countries, in Denmark, England's, France's, Germany's, you are nowhere near the Champions League. So
Yeah.
there's kind of a couple different paths you can take, but going to a smaller country to play in the Champions League is it's unreal being able to say that I've played in the Champions League.
Yeah.
But I had to come to a bit of a smaller country to do it. So it's just a matter of preference, really. But now that's on my resume and can go potentially my next contract to a bigger country and see what kind of doors that opens up.
Yeah. So you mentioned that path, right? If we talk a little bit about that path, can you kind of take us back to, where it all originated? Growing up in kind of the Kansas City area, from what I gather, what was it like in your youth career? Kind of talk to us a little bit about where you played and maybe what that was like for you.
Yeah, of course. I can do that. Growing up, both my parents were footballers. My mom played at Division I level and probably would have played. would have played at a higher level had she not had bum knees. But my dad grew up in Scotland, was born in Scotland, grew up in England, and played his whole life. So
Hmm.
from from the moment I was born, I had a ball at my feet. They were coaching, they were playing at the time, so I was always at the fields. I just grew up around football. And then it continued through high school. Like the early bit of high school, it was more of a social thing for me. Really, I had football, I had school, like I had different friends in those groups, obviously. Um, and I had thought about playing in college. I had considered it, but I was a bit small for my age, to be honest, and I was definitely a late grower, late developer. So when it came time for college, I didn't have the interest that I was hoping for, and really it kind of put me off from college altogether, or from playing in college, not going to college. At one point, I think I was like, I'll go to KU, I'll have a good time, and you know that'll
Mm.
be that. But I had some interest my like end of my junior year, start of my senior year of high school, from like some D2 local D2 schools. Um, but nothing that really got me excited.
Yeah.
Um, but my senior year of high school, I'm a center back. I am a defender at heart, through and through, not an attacker. But my senior year of high school, I became a striker for 75% of the season, just because that's what the coach wanted.
Yeah.
But then it didn't alter my abilities to be recruited, but I was playing out of position. So a D1 school came and watched me and was like, nah, he's not good enough for D1. Like, he's not going to play D1.
Yeah.
So that was a bit discouraging, but also like fueled the fire a bit for me, because when Furman, which is where I went to school, Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, smaller D1 school, but when I eventually decided on Furman, it was a better school than this school. It told me no,
Mm.
but it was very late in the process. So I decided, like, I think January or February of my senior year, spring semester, had finally decided to commit to university, and decided to pursue things after a long, we'll call it 12 months of just agonizing,
Yeah.
decision making, and like a lot of no's. So uh, it wasn't an easy path to college. And then once I got to college, it was it's never an easy path, but you pick your battles, of course.
Yeah. I find that a lot of
So
players
that's
that I
kind of
speak to, I find that a lot of players that I speak to, like, have some point in their career where they either heard, a kind of a big monumental no, or kind of a lot of no's in succession, right? And that then leads to success going forward, right? Do you kind of feel like having that early rejection, so to speak, from some of the schools that you would have loved to attended coming out of high school, did that kind of set you up now to maybe go through some of the adversities that you've been through in your professional career?
Oh man, I've had no's my whole career. When I was 13 or 14, the academy sporting, well, it was the Wizards at the time, but Sporting Kansas
Hmm.
City, now currently, um, they formed their first academy when I was 13 or 14, and I was playing with most of the guys that then became the academy players. But at the time, I
Yeah.
think my parents were both doing their masters, and for whatever reason, I couldn't get to training 4 or 5 times a week, 25, 30 minutes away. So I didn't go immediately with the academy team, and then the next year, I believe I tried to go and I got a no. So I didn't play academy growing up. So that was my one of my first no's, was for the academy. Then I was told no for college several times, and then when I decided on college, even to go to Furman, I was preferred walk on, and there was no
Mm.
expectations of me, and it wasn't like, oh, Kyle's coming into play. It was like, no, we got this kid from Kansas City, and if he turns into anything,
Yeah.
then great. And then after college, I had 5 or 6 no's in a row from professional teams, before anything like materialized with Denmark. But
Yeah.
I've had no's my whole career, and I still get no's now. So you can either look at the nose and say, I'm never going to be good enough, or just keep soldiering on, keep moving on.
Yeah, exactly. Because obviously, when you wound up in college and you had a really successful career at the collegiate level, so how did that kind of transpire of going from, okay, he's a gamble, we're bringing him in, and if he amounts to something, awesome. If not, no real skin off of our back. How did that then transition into, okay, you're getting consistent minutes? Then by the end of your career, you're one of the best players in that conference.
Yeah, it was, I was always an athlete. And even when I was younger, like I said, I was a bit smaller. So my passion and like the way that I basically threw my body around, threw my body weight, and like the way I had to play when I was younger just built me up for when I actually grew into my own body and became like, the size that I am today, 6 foot, 6'1", depends who's asking. But the way I had to play when I was younger just prepared me for college and having to give everything. So I got really lucky when I went to college because I trained really hard the summer before. I went in early, got to know the guys and everything, and I got a couple minutes here and there in the first 3, 4, 5 games, and then one of our players got injured, and I found myself in a starting spot, and I didn't look back. So I took that starting spot and I ran with it, and basically kept it for 4 years, 3.5 years, minus some suspensions.
Yellow card and red card suspensions or other?
No comment. No, yeah, yellow cards. I had one red card, but I blame that on my midfielder. So I'll take a half a red card.
Yeah. So then, especially and obviously it's a different time, right? But especially like you kind of hear about today's college soccer world or just today's college athletics world where the transfer portal is huge, right? And you hear of hundreds and hundreds of kids kind of entering the portal on a consistent basis. For me, it kind of begs the question of you, at that time, was that even something that you were considering, the idea of, hey, I'm having real success at this level and maybe I could go to a bigger program or do something of that nature? Was that even kind of on your mind, or was it like, this school took a chance on me, so I want to kind of pay back that loyalty to them?
There was a little bit of that. It was, Furman gave me the opportunity, so I couldn't turn around. But I don't know. Today's
Yeah.
kids and the newer generation are so quick to jump ship. It's just not something that really ever crossed my mind. Um, and that, like, I was comfortable at Furman. I enjoyed the school. It was a good quality education. I enjoyed all my friends. I was part of a fraternity. Like, I made it my home, so
Mm.
it never really crossed my mind. Like, you know, okay, I will say towards the end of the career, I was thinking, okay, it's time to move on from here. But that was more, I graduated a semester early and
Hmm.
wanted to move on in football. So
Yeah.
the thought of transferring never really came into play. Just, it's not who I am, not what I wanted to do. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Was there ever though kind of that moment of like, because I'm curious if you had the mindset going into college right away, like this is going to be my stepping stone to then go on and play professionally, or if that kind of evolved via the success that you had at Furman, like because especially a program of that size, not a lot of those guys, I imagine, you correct me if I'm wrong, have that aspiration of like I'm going to go on and play professional after this, right? It may be a handful of players, but not really everybody's going with the same mindset as whereas you go to a program like Wake Forest or something like that, a lot of those guys all want to play professionally. So how did that kind of evolve in your time in college?
yeah, I had the dream. Of course, everybody has the dream of playing professionally. I had the dream of playing in Europe. It would have been really cool, but it never really materialized in my mind until like my junior and senior year, really.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I I always gave my all and everything, and that wasn't any sort of issue, but it was never, you know, again, it was kind of like a social aspect as well, for me in college. But then I really got serious about it my junior and senior year. Yeah, it was, I can accredit it to the success that I had at Furman and that we as a program had. um, in developing my. It wasn't a lack of interest. It was a lack of like not a lack of, that's just poor wording, but I never was quite sure if I was going to be able to quality wise to make it, so
Mm.
I didn't want to say, oh, I'm hell bent on becoming a professional and kind of then realize I wasn't good enough, like putting yourself out there and then realizing, okay, it maybe wasn't a possibility. So when I started to recognize that it was a possibility and was like a realistic goal, that's when I became more serious about it.
Gotcha. And I'm curious as well too, is like, I guess help me fill in the dots here, right? Because now you're a player who's playing at a Champions League level, right? And there's other players who
Hmm.
like, you feel like sometimes in the United States for whatever reason, like they just kind of slip through the cracks, whether it be via college, like they don't go to a top college program, or like professionally. Like the example that comes to my mind is recently when Juventus the other day played Maccabi Haifa, and the goalkeeper was American, like came from I think
Was he?
Sacramento Republic.
Okay.
Yeah, came from Sacramento Republic over, and now is pitching a clean sheet against Juventus, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like it happens all over the world, right? But players sometimes kind of fall through the cracks. Like, do you feel like a little bit now there's almost something that's maybe missing in the American scouting system to like for yourself now being like a
How much
Champions
time do
League
we
player?
have?
Or yeah, obviously we could go down a real
Yeah.
rabbit hole here, but
Yeah.
like, does that make sense? My question, like, because I feel like this
No, yeah,
happens
100%.
sometimes, like.
It happens in every country,
Mm,
but of course it's kind of magnified in the US, I think, just because of the population that we have. I mean, 375 is probably on the low end, 375 million. It's easy to miss some players.
yeah.
There's more of a barrier to getting into the academies and to getting into like to the good youth programs in the US. It costs a lot more. You have to travel a much further distance. If somebody has to travel 40 minutes every day across, Houston to get to training, to be in
Mm,
the Dynamo Academy, like sometimes it's not feasible, So
yeah.
um, there's there are plenty of people who fall through the cracks for whatever reason, financial barriers, just not getting the time of day. But the biggest issue in the U.S., I think, is where we place our emphasis when it comes to players.
Mm,
In Denmark, where I was, in Iceland as well, it's the players who have the football sense that are really like coveted over here. If you can play out of the back, if you have the technical ability, you can get away with not having as much of the athletic side if you're technical and read the game well. Like your example is Sergio Busquets. He's not the
mm,
most athletic, but he's always in the right position, But in the US, we place such an emphasis on athletic ability and, how fit you are, how strong you are, how fast you are. And it's just the football IQ is what sometimes is missing in the US
mm.
in the scouting system, like you can have a bunch of athletes, but you need somebody who's going to play the final ball, So I kind of went off on a tangent and got a little bit out of the
No, no, that's good because
out of the topic, but
you hit on a bunch of good points there. Like, it's
yeah, it
something
was all over the
that's,
place there.
I mean, the first one that kind of rang true with me is, and I'm sure you can attest to this too. Like, once you get into Europe, you understand the proximity of all the clubs to you, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're in some of those big countries like a Germany, where I was for a little bit, it's insane the amount of football that's like within touching distance of you. And so
I
even,
mean, if you want an extreme example of that, in Iceland, in Reykjavik, I think
hmm,
8 of the 12 teams in the top league are in Reykjavik or in like a 15-minute drive.
yeah,
And then outside of that, there are two within 40 minutes. And then, of course, two that are a couple hours away. But I mean, the concentration of 8 clubs in the top league in one city is unbelievable.
yeah. So you think about that when you say, you know, a player should always be able to have access to getting to training or getting to, the facility in that sense in those countries, right? But if you're a kid from Montana in the US, like it's just not feasible, unless you're going to move your
Yeah,
entire
where's
family
your
somewhere.
nearest academy? Like, yeah,
Yeah, you're just
yeah.
kind of out of luck, you know what I mean? But the other thing that came up that you were saying, as I agree, there's a lot of, I think, growth that the U.S. needs to do in terms of the way that they view the game. Where do you think you
hmm
kind of fell on that scale of coming over to Europe, with that tactical and technical versus physical side of it? Like, what did you feel like you brought to the game a lot of, and maybe was there also an adjustment period on certain elements of that?
Oh, 100% an adjustment period. My first 6 months in Denmark were a bit eye-opening and I mean a bit rough, to be honest. I
Mm,
felt very, very much below the technical level, um, and a little bit of tactical as well. But what I did bring was I fall much more on the athletic side than the technical side, which is kind of funny
mm,
because I'm talking about how that's emphasized in the US versus the technical that's emphasized in Europe. But yet I went to Europe being on the athletic side. So
mm,
it kind of, that's actually what helped me stand out. Like my athletic ability, my ability to close down spaces when I defend and everything is what eventually afforded me the opportunity to then grow technically in Europe. So
mm.
uh, a bit backwards actually, but that's kind of just how the chips fell for me.
Yeah. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how kind of you arrived at that first, contract in Denmark, right? I know you said had that success in college that we kind of spoke about. So, like when you're graduating, what sort of the thought process? How are you, attacking this dream? Because this is always something I'm really curious about for players. You know, okay, they get that degree or they choose to leave college. Like, what's kind of step number one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I decided to graduate a semester early. We always had to be at school basically in the summer, so I had plenty of credits. So I graduated early just because I know that the window that the USL and MLS teams are looking for players is January to March,
Hmm.
and you can't be stuck in school till May, if you want to get a contract. So that was, I guess, my first step. Second step was I tried to get into the combine, but I won't go too much into it. But I got a little bit of the short straw
Hmm.
um, on that one, just because there was two or three, I will call it 3 or 4 options in the conference. And we're a smaller conference, so um, only 1 or 2 guys really kind of got the nod of approval from the collective coaches in order to get into the combine. My coach did not stick his neck out for me, unfortunately. So
Hmm.
I got shafted a little bit in that. So then it came down to okay, how am I going to do this? So I went to a couple of combines, couple of invite onlys, couple of tryouts that I got through coaches in the conference, through my own coach, through uh, acquaintances, like friends from different programs and everything. But my first one that I went to was an open try, or it was a tryout. It was kind of invite only in Charlotte, and that one did not go well for me. I didn't even get invited the second day, so that was my
Really?
first no. After that, yeah, yeah,
So what
yeah. I
happened that
just,
caused it to go like that?
I just wasn't me. I was playing timid. I didn't want to make mistakes. I chose the easy options, and then inevitably, like if you don't play as yourself, if you don't play your own game, it's not like the if you're not being genuine in your own game, then it's pretty easy to spot, and
Yeah.
that was the case with that. The second one I went to was in Pittsburgh. I paid to go to this one, I believe, or no, I at least paid the travel expenses to get there, um, and did okay there. Did better in terms of like playing how I wanted to play and everything, but there were 70 kids there, and I spoke with the coach, and he said, yeah, we think you possibly have the potential, but we're just not ready to take a chance on you. So
Hmm.
another no there. And then I think what was next? I went to an open tryout in Oklahoma City uh, to try and get an invite to their preseason. So I went there. and I don't really remember it at all, but I got invited to preseason. So I went to preseason like mid-February with OKC for about 2 weeks. I was doing well. I felt comfortable. I felt like I was, at the level and all of that. I was playing well. Coach liked me. I had several conversations with him. I made it through the first kind of wave of cuts. And then we had a friendly that we were going to play, and basically he came to me and he said, look, we have a guy that we're trying to bring from abroad. He's having some visa issues. There's a couple barriers he has to jump over, and if he doesn't come through, then potentially we could discuss bringing you on. But if his visa goes through, then we're not going to have the money, space, etc. for you. So basically, like 2 days later, it was like, yeah, it went through. So
yeah,
it's like, yeah, sorry, I think you can play at this level, you have the potential, but again, not ready to take a chance on you. So after that, I then had a trial with my hometown, Sporting Kansas City. It was Swope Park Rangers, the USL team at that time.
mm-hmm.
So I went there for 2 weeks, but they had just drafted who they just drafted? Oh, Graham. Yeah. So they just drafted Graham from Denver, and then they also signed my friend Matt Lewis on a homegrown contract, both of which were center backs. And then they'd also acquired Dakota. I don't know where from, to be honest. Sorry, Dakota. But so they had 3 center backs, and then a youth center back that they had as well that they were trying to bring up. So I did well there. I felt I did well enough to get a contract, but there wasn't space for me. So got another no there, and then I went to Tulsa next. This is like a week before the season's about to begin. So I secured this. It's kind of an invite to this trial during preseason, but it turned out to just be not worth my time at all. I left after 2 days.
Really?
Basically, I got this invite on the word of a coach that I knew. But when I got there, the coach had no idea who I was, didn't know anything about my background or anything, just said, yeah, Kim sent you, okay. And then it was like, it was bizarre, man. We were in trainings, and it was like, all right, Charles, just go over there and be in the corner. Okay. Like, yeah, so left after that.
I feel like
I
that
gave it a
happens so
day, and
many
then
times where like guys will
it
get sent
does. Like,
places and the coaches have no idea.
yeah, like, it was just like, oh, you should check this guy out. And it was like, that was it. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh, he played at the D1 level. Like this is his resume. He's good enough. It was like, yeah, here's this guy, Kyle. It's like, okay, who the hell is Kyle? Kyle, go
Yeah.
stand in the corner. So yeah, it was, it happens. Of course, there's miscommunications and everything, but I wasn't at a point where I was going to stick around and try and see if anything developed. I just said, screw this. So I got out of there, and then basically the USL season started. My window closed, and I knew that, and it was like, all right, well, what's next? So I was home for about 2 weeks, and then I was going mad because just being at home. So I decided to go train. I got put in touch with this French international who lived in Dallas and trained players and worked with FC Dallas a little bit. And he's actually, I believe he's still the assistant coach now in FC Dallas. But I got put in contact with him. I decided I was going to go train with him. And then I found an NPSL team, and I went and lived with my aunt in Dallas, and was just training, staying fit, playing with this NPSL team, just kind of biding my time because I didn't know what else to do, to be honest. I wasn't really still reaching out to coaches, wasn't doing anything, just playing. And then I heard so I went through AX Soccer Tours is the company that I went through to get to Denmark. So I went to one of their combines, basically emailed the guy after I saw somebody I knew on their Instagram, and I said, hey, I'm not going to pay $500. Here's my resume. I have a place to stay. Would you just take me? And this was like 2 days before it started. He emailed me, yeah, sure, let's go. Just come down. So I went down, stayed with some family friends, and went to this combine. And I didn't think much of it, to be honest. Some of these guys that paid $500 should definitely have gotten their refund. But it was an interesting experience. I just enjoyed it, had some fun, and then at the end of that, the technical director of my club in Denmark came up to me, after these games and just said, "Hey, Kyle, we'd love to have you to Denmark on trial." And I was like, "Okay, sick," and he's like, "Yeah, we'll stay in touch and see how it goes from there." And I was like, this was middle of May, start of May, around May. Their season ends at the end of May, so, and I knew
Yeah.
this, I was aware of that, I was aware of the European schedule, and it was like, okay, he wants me on trial, but yeah, sure, it'll probably be after the summer, starting next year, got some months. So went back to Dallas, was just chilling, living my life, and then I got a call from Alex, who was the owner of AX at that time. He said, "Hey, this Danish club's really interested in you. They want you on trial." And I was like, "Yeah." I spoke to him about it. I was like, "What do you think? Like July or August?" And he was like, "Yeah, they actually want you there next week." And I was like, "Holy shit! Okay, next week in Denmark. All right." So I was fit. Of course, that was one of the biggest parts of my successes. I was staying fit. I was staying sharp and training and playing. So I booked these flights. I paid for myself, I believe. Booked my flights and went to Denmark for a 2-week trial. I was going into a team that was 3 games left and needed 4 points out of 3 games to stay in the division. We're fighting relegation, and
Hmm.
I was going over on trial at the end of the season. So I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be,
Yeah.
it's going to be a bit of a shit show. These guys are not going to want me here. It could be interesting. That wasn't the case. Everybody was super nice. Everybody spoke English. Everybody was super welcoming. They were interested in what I was doing there as an American, So
Hmm.
um, it worked out, of course. After the 2-week trial, they wanted to sign me, and they did. And then I went back home for the summer for a month and a half. I was with my family and everything, and then I went and started my contract in Denmark in July.
Hmm. How do you
So there's the long-winded version.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like in that long-winded version, right? Like, because I think sometimes as players we sort of like gloss over how necessarily like difficult that process is of like, okay, I flew to Oklahoma, they said no. Then I flew to here,
Yeah,
they said no. Like, I think, and not to, I'll just pat ourselves on the back, but I think there's a lot of people who, after one or two of those times, are like, holy shit, man, like this is really hard. Like, what am I doing? Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, and I think
yeah, definitely.
there, yeah, but there's something that you can hear, like even when you're speaking about it, that you have just this sort of like, okay, what's the next up, right? Like, what's the next step? Like, how do you? Is that something that you've always had, or is that like a learned kind of behavior of just let me put that behind me and now move on?
Okay, well, first off, I'll say I was very fortunate to be financially supported by my parents because I didn't work in college. I didn't hardly have my own money.
Mm,
So it was not like I was paying this out of pocket and having to grind, working a job to then go spend my hard-earned bucks to do this. So I was very fortunate that my parents supported my dreams and my aspirations for all of what 6 7 months. So I was very fortunate in that sense. And then when it came to it was the answers that I kept getting, because I kept getting the answer like, "Oh, I think you're good enough,
mm,
but we don't have space for you." If it had been an outright no, I did get some outright no's. They say, "Yeah, you're not, I don't think you're good enough," So I did get a couple of those, but I also got 2 or 3 like, "Yeah, you have possible potential. Like maybe you could do this." So I think that just kept resonating in my head. Um, those I held on to that sliver of hope, like, yeah, you possibly, maybe, somewhat could have a chance,
mm,
So I grasped onto that small percentage, and I said, all right, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna do it, or I'm gonna, if I am gonna fail, then it's just gonna be that I exhausted all my options, and it just didn't work. But the beautiful thing about football that I've come to learn is it takes one coach, one system, like one setup
Yeah.
for you to really to not only like fit into but to find success. It's like, four out of, we'll even say 9 out of 10 coaches may not think you're good enough, but the 10th coach has the system that you perfectly fit into, as a player. And it's like, and then you can go from not having a contract to being in the 11 to being a stud on a team just because some coach has some belief in these tactics that perfectly fit your game, So football is it's a crazy sport because it's so opinionated,
Yeah.
Somebody could say, "Oh, he's shit," Like there are people even at the top level, like everybody's talking about Trent Alexander-Arnold right now, saying he can't defend, but like, he got put in a system with Klopp where he didn't have to do a lot of defending in their success. He was able to bomb forward and use his strengths. So it's a game of opinions, and if you find the right person who's got the right opinion of you and puts belief in you, then everything can change. It's crazy. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about the game is like you can even finally get that opportunity, right? Maybe a coach does take a chance on you, whether you go on trial or what have you. But then if it's a system that just completely doesn't match the style of play that you provide, like then it kind of makes it look as if you actually can't hack it at the level or you're not good enough to play there. And it's like, the inverse of that is true. Sometimes people can kind of get raised to the top a little bit based on the system that they're playing in because they can excel in those few things that they're being asked to do in that role. Was there an
Yeah.
element of that, like in that team for, in Denmark, where you just kind of fit what they needed or the way that they wanted to play? And was that the reason that they chose to bring you in?
Well, okay, so I'll start with this. I had a 2-year contract. I had 6 different coaches,
Mm,
2 different owners. And from the first year to the second year, out of 26 guys, we kept 5.
wow.
So, yeah, so the coach that brought me over was only there for 7 games of the season of my first season. So he brought me over because he saw basically an athletic ability in me that had some potential to develop technically and gave me a chance. And then the coach that came in after him was a bit of a hard ass. He played 15 years in FC Copenhagen. He was a very technical player. He had great vision, great tactics. Like, it took me a long time to learn from him and to really like get his full trust.
Mm-hmm.
So I started 1 game in my fall of my first year. Actually, funny enough, we played the third place team. I scored the first goal and we won 7-1. Um, did not start the next game, so that was fun. Um, I was in the weight room and he came in, he said, "Kyle, you did really well in this game. Like you kind of exceeded my expectations." He said, "Most coaches would put you in the 11, next week, no questions asked." He said, "I'm not most coaches." I said, "Oh,
Oh my God.
thanks for that."
All right, cool, man. You have so
Appreciate
much
that.
more wisdom than
Yeah,
all of us.
yeah. I mean, the thing was, I replaced the captain only because he was suspended.
Mm,
So of course I wasn't going to displace the captain just off of one performance, but that was definitely tough to hear. But
yeah.
eventually, in the spring, I earned his trust and played several times under him in the spring. But yeah, I mean, I just got the contract I got was off of one coach's belief in my athletic ability that could then develop technically, So like you said, it's a bit of dumb luck. And then I had to adjust after 7 games because this new guy came in. So it's just it's a game, it's a life of adjusting, being able to adjust on the fly and adapt.
Yeah. So how, like, if you had a player who's in a similar situation where they're going through that many coaches over the span of a contract, because it's a very different thing to navigate, right? Like versus just going on a trial and trying to impress
Yeah.
a coach, as opposed to you're already in the club, you're already there, but now there's a completely different coach coming in, and you have to kind of figure out first what they want and then, how to meet their expectations. Like, what would you advise to a player, maybe a younger player that calls you and is like, okay, I just signed my first contract and now the coach is gone after 5 games. He was the one who brought me in. Like, what should they be kind of thinking about?
Um, I mean, really, the first bit, it's a tough question to answer. Like, if you're a young guy who's just coming into the first team trainings, it can be a bit dicey because my first advice would be to go speak with the coach.
Mm,
Hear what their ideas are, introduce yourself, get familiar with them, because um, even as a foreigner, it can be even more difficult because
mm,
um, this guy may come in if he so in Denmark, I was one of two foreigners when this guy came in. He was Danish. He knew all the Danish players. He had preconceptions of all these Danish players, knew where they played, who they were, but he had no idea in hell who I was. So I had
yeah.
to make sure that he did know who I was. I had to make sure that he saw me early in training. He saw me in the gym. He saw me putting in extra hours, and I had to go out of my way to speak with him, to build a relationship with him, just to then get an opportunity to prove myself like once or twice. So um, the first piece of advice would be just go speak with him. You got to build a relationship, because if you don't have a relationship with your coach or with the staff or with older players, then you're kind of up shit's creek. If you're a loner, like, you better be a damn good player.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's about relationships.
Yeah. 100%. And so then, as you kind of go into the end of that season, like you said, only 5 of the 26 came back, right, for that second season of
Yeah.
your contract. What, like, is that kind of going through your head as well, as maybe you're talking to other guys and contracts aren't getting renewed or they're choosing to go elsewhere? Like, what's going through your head going into that season?
So that was a entirely like one-off scenario. It was the one of the most bizarre scenarios I've ever been a part of, because at the end of my first year, oh man, all right, we'll get into it. This is so strap in. Here we go. So at the end of my first year, um, the coach that came in that I was just speaking of brought accusations against some of the players of match fixing in his own team.
Wow.
So 3 games left in this season. We're fighting relegation, and our coach accuses not directly any players, but accuses us of match fixing. We at this point 2 or 3, okay, I'll say a month before, we had just had a scare of bankruptcy. So we
Mm,
were we were like 24 hours away from being bankrupt. Everybody, let out of their contracts, and the club going under, just dissolving. So we had just gotten through this. We just got a new owner. The new owner came in, saved everything, righted the ship, stopped it from sinking, and then a month later, our coach accuses us of match fixing. There's a formal investigation that goes on. He's placed on leave. We have a new manager come in part time to finish out the season. We avoid relegation. Our coach, it becomes clear he's not coming back. And then this new owner, because my first year we were a full-time club, we were paying some ridiculous wages, to be honest. And we're full-time, training in the morning, lunch was provided, all this. My second year, over this summer, the new owner decides that he's no longer running things in the red. We're no longer going to be full-time. He's no longer going to pay the level of wages that he was once paying. So basically the 5 that we kept were on the lower end of the wage scale. And then we became the top end of the wage scale in this new team. So
yeah.
it was a bizarre situation. New coach, new owner, new club, basically. Like, now we're training in the afternoons. Guys have second jobs. People are earning significantly less than my teammates were the year before. And it turned into like something totally different. So at that point, like, I went from being, in the 13 or 14 that was like off the bench at the end of the season, and then I started like the last 6 or 7 games, I think. Then I went to be like one of the first 3 on the team sheet, because we got all these new players, and like
Hmm.
I don't know if I can really say that, but basically our new owner built a team in the second division for the third division, like with some of the
Yeah.
wages he was paying and like some of the players that he brought in, so he didn't build this team to sustain in the division that we were in. So like I
Hmm.
then became one of the most experienced guys and like one of the first on the team sheet, like I said. So it was, I don't even remember the question, but that was the what happened from year one to year two for me. So just to
Yeah.
recap, in my 2-year contract, I had 6 different coaches, 2 different owners, one official police investigation, and a bankruptcy scare. So, and the whole time we were fighting relegation, which we actually got relegated my second year. So it was, man, my 2 years there were some of the longest and like most exciting 2 years of my life. But it was, it's crazy to think about now just how much I actually experienced in that 2 years.
Yeah. Can you help put this into context though for people who maybe aren't as familiar with like what it's like to play football at this level, right? Like cuz you've talked to countless players from all around the world, and while maybe no one quite has an identical story to what you just kind of laid out, a lot of
Hmm.
people have a story where like I remember, a couple episodes ago I was interviewing a guy, and something to do with like the owner was sleeping with like the coach's wife or
Oh,
something like that, and
geez.
like just all sorts of different things like kind of that nature that go on behind the scenes that people like that aren't involved in football don't really understand. Like, is this, I don't want to necessarily say commonplace, right, but like is kind of that craziness of lower level football just something that is, you know prevalent kind of in a lot of different places around the world?
It can be. I mean, it totally depends on the club and sometimes on the country that you're in. Like Denmark
Mm,
is generally speaking very well professionally run. Like, I don't think this happens all that often in Denmark, in the Scandinavias, maybe in some
yeah.
Eastern European countries you gets a little dicier. Um, but the main thing is like even with all this going on, we still had to show up as professionals to training, like still train, still play professionally. Like you still have to fulfill your contract. You are playing with passion and of course you're still passionate, but it's a job. Like if you show up and start fucking around and like
Yeah.
and aren't taking your contract seriously, your contract gets ripped up. So all this is going on, but we still had to like it was weird because like you had to have a bit of a tunnel vision. Like when you stepped off the pitch, it was like, oh, did you hear like what's happening now? Like
Yeah.
now we're near bankrupt. But when you stepped on the field, it was professional. Like these guys are earning paychecks and feeding their families and everything. So it was some of the most like what do you call it? Like segmenting, I guess, like
Yeah, like
compartmentalizing.
compartmentalizing.
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, there you go. Compartmentalizing. Like off the pitch was one thing, but on the pitch you had to be professional. Like you were there to fulfill your job. So it was crazy, but it was it just teaches you to I don't even know what it teaches you, to be honest. It teaches you that
Resiliency, maybe? I don't
it
know,
teaches you
something.
like yeah, I don't even know, but I mean I learned something. I don't know what I learned, but but yeah, it was a bizarre time. So, a lot of this happens behind the scenes. Like, unfortunately we're hearing now about Mbappe and all this stuff behind the scenes in,
Yeah.
in PSG, but like he still went and scored on the weekend, or not even on the
Yeah.
weekend in Champions League. So like he's still performing at the highest level he can as a professional. So you still have to maintain your professional status even with all this bullshit going on off the field.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like, it's like any job, there's always going to be office politics or drama or stuff like that. And I think it just gets heightened that much more in a super competitive environment like sport, right? And then especially,
Yeah.
you talk about the example of Mbappe, you tack on the fact of like there's millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars kind of just being thrown around. Then it
Yeah.
starts to get really crazy.
Yeah, that's even on a different scale. Like we're talking tens of thousands in my situation, but when it comes to millions, tens of millions, even billions, at this highest level, that's why it gets so much spotlight, so much news coverage and everything. It's crazy.
Yeah. So at the end of that second season, was there just kind of like just like an exhaustion, so to speak, of I don't know if I can kind of do this for another year, or was like that even a conversation that was happening between you and the club? Like, I have to imagine after that 2 year span, there is just a level of like, I need to get a little bit away from this club right now.
Yeah, so for as much as I was telling you like that happened, a lot of it kind of ceased in the fall of my second year. So like,
Hmm.
we had all these crazy changes over the summer, new players, new coach, new owner, and new like system. But um, we'll call it like mid fall, like when we're in the season, in the swing of things, it kind of a lot of things settled down because basically everything kind of just settled into place. And then actually, oh, that's the other thing was COVID then came in
Hmm.
March of 2020. So we played 3 games in the spring season, um, and then got like 3 months off. So I went home because I wasn't going to be stuck in Denmark in my apartment doing nothing. So you ask about like the craziness, but it calmed down a lot. And then I was at home for 2 months. So like a lot of it slipped my mind, and the
Yeah.
pressure was kind of like off for a good bit. So um, when it came down to it, I didn't want to stay with my club because we got relegated, and I
Hmm.
felt I was good enough to stay in the league. So I looked elsewhere in the league. But at that time, unfortunately, because of COVID, there wasn't a lot of money. There wasn't a lot of opportunity. So I could have stuck in around in Denmark and waited 2, 3 months, not even 2, 3 months, 1, 2 months, like waiting for a contract to basically pop up. And I fully believe that I would have gotten an opportunity or a contract, but it wouldn't have been from a position of power or like leverage that I would have wanted, because I felt as though I'd proved myself in the league and deserved like a little bit of a pay bump and all that, but it just wasn't going to happen given the outside circumstances. So I didn't have enough money to stick around for a month or two and pay for my apartment and pay for food, and on the hope of a contract that wasn't going to be up to the standard that I wanted. So ultimately, my decision was kind of made for me. But um, I had wanted to stay in Denmark. I love Denmark actually, but just wasn't in the cards. Didn't happen, unfortunately. And then I
Hmm.
got this opportunity in Iceland and just jumped on it.
Yeah, how did that come about? Did the club just kind of already have you on their radar based on your performances there, or was it what's the situation that brought you over to
No,
Iceland?
so okay, so at Furman, my brother also played at Furman. He was 2 years younger than me. But the year after I left, an Icelandic player came in to Furman, and basically my parents and his parents visited Furman at the same time on a weekend. Met each other, became friends. My mother loves to talk, so she said, "Oh, my son's playing in Denmark at the time. This is in 2018.
Yeah.
Is playing in Denmark, and blah blah blah." And they said, "Oh, if he ever wants to come visit Iceland, he's got a bed to stay in." So this was in like, we'll say October of 2018, and I was like, well, hell yeah, I'll go to Iceland. Like, so on my winter break before I went home, I went and spent 7 days in Iceland. So I stayed with them, and he played football and was involved in coaching to some extent at the time, and told me all about his career and his influence in Icelandic football and all this, and it was just in the back of my mind. So in 2020, I called him. I said, "Hey, any chance you could help me, find a team in Iceland?" And he said, just so happens I'm the assistant coach in this team. Iceland runs on the summer schedule, like the same as MLS. So it was like, we have 8 games left. We're currently in third place, 1 point behind second, and the top 2 teams promote to the first division. So it was the second tier.
Hmm.
There's 8 games left. We could use a center back. So it was just dumb luck. I just called him like on a whim and said, "Hey, any chance?" And he said, "You can fit in this slot perfectly right here."
Yeah.
And I basically, like, I called him. I texted him while I was in Austria, in Vienna, on holiday with one of my friends. I got back, called him. He told me all these details, like said, "This is the contract. This is how we play. This is blah blah blah." And then like 36 hours later, I was in Iceland and signed a contract, and the next week I was playing. So
Wow.
it was a bit bizarre because my thinking was 8 games left, and then like in the top tier. I said, shit, I'll do that. I'll go play 8 games in the second tier and find myself in a first tier, play a season there, and then move on. And like you know, coming from playing in a first tier in any country carries like just more weight
Huge.
than
Yeah.
a second or a third. Yeah, a second or a third tier, even in a big country. So my thinking was I'll go there for 8 games, play a season in the top league, and then bounce. That did not happen. The 8 games that were left, we played 6 of them. We're tied in second on points, but we're behind on goal difference. And then they canceled the league with 2 games left,
Oh,
and we played the first place team still. Like, was one of our last 2 games. So if we
yeah.
won that game, we were gonna be promoted. So they canceled the league and then sent this other team up. Even though we're tied on points, they sent them up on goal difference.
Oh,
Just it was ridiculous, honestly. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. But then I'd only played 6 games, and no teams in the top division had seen enough of me to nobody was coming calling after me. So I signed another year with this team, and then the following year was fantastic. We actually went undefeated the whole summer and got promoted.
mm.
But that's how I ended up in Iceland. Just relationships and a bit of dumb luck that one of their center backs had just gone to college in the U.S. So there you have it.
Wow.
A
And
lot of
it is
a
funny
lot of
the
the
way that,
careers about timing. It's crazy.
yeah, I was just about to say that it's funny the way that just like things kind of work in that, mysterious way. You never know who you're going to meet or talk to or bump into. And then all of a sudden your life
Yeah,
can change drastically.
exactly.
It's like the kind of amazing thing about football, but also kind of scary. It's like you almost don't know what's in store for your life, where you can't really plan quite the same way.
Yeah, it's a beautifully cruel game, as I like to say. It's it just takes a little bit of the right timing, to for everything to happen. But timing can be an absolute bitch. So
Yeah.
you could be set for a move and then pick up a serious injury. Like, you it just the timing is unreal. You could luck yourself into like one good season and luck yourself into basically a lifetime of earnings just
Yeah.
on one good season, or like you could miss an opportunity just on one stupid injury. So it's
Hmm.
it's crazy. It's beautifully cruel, but that's the game of football in itself. So
Yeah,
there you go.
exactly. And just one quick thing that popped into my head was like how you said you went to Iceland and then within a week, like you were already playing, right? After you had just flown there. And this is something that a lot of players will speak about, but maybe it was just because it's easier in Iceland or what have you. But like you were able to get your work visa and everything like that sorted that quickly. Because I know for a lot of players that can sometimes be like a hassle that can like we said, the timing, like that can hinder players from getting into the field right away because there's so many rules about foreigners coming into new countries to play.
Yeah, I went from one EU country to the next, so I
Okay.
technically had still an EU visa that was working, so it was transferable basically. Um, that's how I was a bit lucky there. But actually, the following season, I had some visa issues just at the beginning of the season when I first got there, because at that point, Brexit happened, and my British passport no longer was EU
Mm,
as of like January 2021. So I then had to apply for a different type of visa, and um, yeah, so then it took like or not months, 6 weeks. Um, but I was able to apply while I was home, get most of like 75% of it done there, and then like you had to show up in person for the last 25%, and then I waited probably 7 to 10 days. Um, so I had visa issues in Denmark as well when I initially
yeah.
arrived, but it's just it's a reality of the profession and going over to Europe. So
Yeah.
depends on your club, depends on the country, like how on top of it your club is, and just you know, it's a bit of dumb luck again.
Yeah. And again, just I wanted to bring it up only because, I know there are a lot of players who are listening, and as we mentioned, how hard it is just to, find a team to play for. That's always something that I want players to be aware of as well. It's not just as simple as, flying to Denmark, Sweden, name the country, and then you find a team and boom, everything is roses after that. There's also a
Yeah,
lot of kind of hoops to jump through, as you just mentioned.
yeah, and it entirely depends on the country you're in. Like some countries it's fairly easy to
Yep.
get a visa, and some countries you got to jump through a bunch of different hoops. Like I think you've been in Germany, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like in Germany, it's tough, and then you basically have to agree to like learn the whole German language, right? As part of the visa. Is that
So
accurate?
uh that's the most common visa, like for players who are kind of doing it in the lower leagues. The most common visa they have is
Yeah.
what's called a language learning visa. So it's essentially like the same as a student visa,
Okay.
but you just have to, take German courses. Now there's a lot of
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
ways that you
I
can,
heard that from one of my friends who played there, so
yeah, there's ways you can kind of like navigate around it if you do it the right way. But I'm
okay.
not here to
Yeah.
promote anything on the
Yeah,
podcast
of
here.
course.
But
Yeah,
like,
we're not saying anything. Stay
exactly,
legal, kids.
100%. But it's like, for somebody like you, when you have that UK passport, now for somebody who doesn't have that UK passport, like if anyone who's an American was like, I'm going to go try and play in England, I'd be like, stop. What do you like? No, there's literally
Yeah.
no
No.
possibility of
Good
it.
luck.
Like, it's not going to work just
Yeah.
because of how, like you said, how strict it is for a country like England or Scotland or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, so now you're in that second season in Iceland, and obviously, like you said, it has a lot of success, and there's great things to come from that. So then, what was the choice then to go and was it the Icelandic champions at the time when you joined Vikinger?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
they
so was that part
so
of the
we
draw?
promoted, won the league and everything. Yeah, 100%.
Hmm.
So when they came calling for me, Vikinger were the league and the cup champions. They won the double. They had secured Champions League football, and I believe they were much more, they had the structure in place to obviously to compete in the top league as they had just won the league. Um, I had asked I had asked several I'd asked for a bunch of different things in the club that I left. I'd asked for things to change. I wanted another assistant coach. I wanted a fitness coach. I wanted X, Y, and Z. Basically, I wanted the guarantee of bringing in some more foreigners. It's just, I was asking a lot, but it wasn't anything out of like it wasn't it wasn't anything crazy. It was just what I felt that they needed to then survive and possibly
Yeah.
even compete in the top league. They've actually competed well this year, so hats off to them. They're well, knock on wood, they're going to stay in the division. And of course, when you come up, staying there for the first year is one of the toughest things. But in the end, they just couldn't provide what I was looking for in terms of the club and on the field and everything. And then I sat down with my current coach, the coach of Vikinger, and in the 30 minutes that I sat down with him, just his way of thinking about football, talking about football, the tactics he shared with me, he said, "This is how I see you fitting in. This is how we play to like the strengths that you have, while also like fitting you into the system and improving you technically and tactically." So I had like a 30-minute conversation with him, and I was basically sold after that. He played in the Prem and in the Eredivisie and in Ligue 1, and his football mind is just unreal. So combining his knowledge that I could learn from, two of the center backs that had just retired were national team players, played in various countries, played in the Champions League, played against Barcelona and everything. So two guys that I could learn from. One of them became the technical director, the other became assistant coach, and then the promise of European football. So it really, unfortunately, for my old club, was no competition when it came down to it. To deciding to move on, I felt it was best for my career and best for helping me progress.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder if you ever think about it sometimes, like kind of the progression that you've had in your career, like playing in college or, then some of those days in Denmark where you're kind of like your head is spinning like what is going on with this club at certain points, and now like, we spoke a little bit about the top, but it's like, lifting cup trophies and playing European football, playing against, giants like Malmo and who'd you play in Poland? Poznan, right?
Yeah, like Poznan.
Like sometimes I'm sure like for you a little bit surreal to think about like kind of that progression of now kind of seeing where you are in terms of football.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's this year, the last couple of years have definitely been a lot of highs, but there are also a lot of lows in the career and in the you know in what we're doing. I had my times in Denmark. Like I said, the first 6 months, I didn't feel as though technically I was like up to speed.
Mm.
That's like understating, honestly. I felt as though I was one of the worst players on the training pitch damn near every day. I don't know if you know about Scandinavia's or the followers do, but in the
Yep.
winters, it's cold, wet, and dark.
Yes.
And if you're in a team that's not winning much, if you're not in the team, life can get dark quick. So I had my times where I was thinking, this isn't for me. I'm done. I'm going home. I can't do this. I'm not good enough to be here. I'm not going to get my chance. Like this weather's miserable. It costs too much to live here. I'm not making enough money. So like, I had 6 to 8 months of that mind, not even that mindset of the, like those thoughts that kept creeping into my head. It was like it was some tough times, because
Yeah.
you never want to feel as though you're the worst on the pitch. And if you're winning, life's good, but if you're losing, it's not nearly as fun, which could potentially come into play again in my career. Because if I want to move on from Iceland, it's theoretically going to be to a team that's mid-table to bottom table in a bigger league. If I want to take a bigger step, if I want to step up, so then it goes back into, if I'm not winning week in and week out, and I'm losing a lot, and I potentially am not in the starting 11, like it's easy to uh to get back to that thinking and everything. So it's going to become a bit of an interesting decision for me, because if I want to move on, life gets tougher. Of course, the benefits get greater. Presumably, I'd get better wages and I'd be in a better team and I'd keep improving. But uh, I gotta go back to then being one of the worst.
Yeah.
So do I want to do that, or do I want to stay where I know I can find success in Iceland and Vikingur, and still make decent money and still do what I love, but win and be happy? Like, and I'm not saying losing and winning is equal to happy and
Mm.
miserable, but it definitely, like, this is my life. I'm not doing anything else besides playing football. So as shit as it is, football, like, results change my mood and they change my week, so
Yeah.
it's a reality of the career.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like how we kind of talked about when you were in Denmark, that compartmentalization, right? Like it
Yeah,
becomes kind of a slippery slope sometimes to just like take everything
yeah,
from your personal life and put it to the side. And now like I'm just this different person for an hour, like, an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever, when I'm in the office, right? So to speak. Like it becomes hard to kind of juggle those dual personalities when one is like, I'm really struggling, I'm not happy in certain instances, and now it's like I have to go to the field and give my best self and put my best self forward, um,
yeah. And
on a day in and day
it's
out
also
basis.
tough because sometimes your personal life is non-existent. Like,
Yeah.
at the my first year in Denmark, I was living in Roskilde, which is about 30 minutes outside of Copenhagen. And only one, my roommate, who was also American, for the first 6 months, and then one other player lived in Roskilde. So it's not like I was hanging out with my teammates outside of the pitch or anything. Like, it's not like I had a bunch of friends. It was a smaller town. I had a roommate. Like, we didn't, we hung out together all the time. Like, we talked a lot, but it was not easy. We didn't have a social life. We weren't hanging out with people on the weekends because we had games, we weren't meeting people. And then actually he left after 6 months, and then I lived with a Danish guy. So it was, I didn't have a social life. And a lot of the times, like when it gets tough in the US, like when soccer wasn't going well at Furman, I had friends from school that I would go hang out with, and I could forget about football. I could put it to the
Yeah.
side, but I didn't have that outlet in Denmark, and I didn't even have it like when I initially came to Iceland. It's gotten better now, but it's not an easy. It's not like you continue the social life that you have. A lot of my friends' lives are continuing on. They've developed. They got fiancés, wives, kids. So
Hmm.
I've had to put some of that on hold just to pursue this career. So there are definitely there's definitely prices to pay. Not prices, but you choose
Yeah.
you know to pursue this career. It's maybe something you have to sacrifice. I don't see my family on their birthdays, and I don't see them for more than probably a month or two out of the year. So it's there's some tough realities that come along with the career.
Yeah, 100%. Because, like we said, like, unfortunately, the level that you're at now, like, it's still an amazing level, but it's not at that level, of a Kylian Mbappe where he can just fly his family to live wherever it is that,
Yeah,
he is, or
yeah.
fly his
I am
friends
not
in and
paying the
out.
money to go home for a weekend. Like it's not in my
Yeah,
budget. So
exactly, exactly. And it is really tough. Like, I think that's one thing I definitely underestimated when I first went over. Like, when I first went to Germany, I had players around me who were kind of like, Americans or foreigners as well. So that made it easier. We're all going through a common experience. But, my second time going
hmm
back to Europe, it was like, that was one of the biggest things. It was like, I don't really feel like I have an escape from this, because it's like, okay, if I'm not playing well, then I'm going back to my apartment and it's just me there. And now I'm thinking about
yeah,
how shitty I just played this entire time. And there's a kind of no escape
yep,
from it. Um, it's
yeah,
tough, man. It really gets tough sometimes.
yeah. But I will say on the flip side, on a more positive note, uh, since coming over to Europe, like in some of my off time, I can't go home. It's not that easy. But when I was in Denmark, like I used my time to travel. So,
Yeah.
football wasn't only a career, it was also a gateway to new experiences. I think I visited 15 new countries, saw a bunch of different things I would never have experienced if I wasn't playing in Europe. And then, I mean, even in the next 6 weeks, I'm going to go to 5 new countries and the World Cup. So like,
Really?
I'm paid well enough. Yeah, I'm paid well enough to be able to experience you know, uh, some of these countries, these cultures, and all this. So, as tough as it can be sometimes, like
Yeah.
it's still full of experiences. Like I had so our normal schedule in Denmark was like we played on a Sunday, trained on a Monday, Tuesday off, Wednesday we trained in the morning, and then Thursday we would train in the afternoon. So we played well on a Sunday. My coach told us before training on Monday, he said, "I'm giving you Wednesday off, and then yeah, we don't have training until Thursday afternoon." So I went home, got out my laptop, and I said, "All right, where can I go between Monday afternoon and Thursday
Mm.
afternoon?" So I went to Budapest for 48 hours just by myself. Just went to
Yeah.
Budapest and experienced Budapest, and it was sick. Like and I think it cost me like $25 round trip. So there are definitely positives with this life. But
Yeah.
you take the good with the bad, of course.
Yeah, yeah, huge positives for sure. And maybe we can kind of wrap it here, because I know obviously you have some decisions to make in the off season, and we can. It's not worth it trying to predict, exactly what you're going to do, because you'll have to take the time to be able to figure out what's best for you and for your situation. But where are some of the places that you're seeing this off season before hitting up the World Cup?
So I'm on contract for another year, if that was what
Oh,
you're
okay.
kind of getting at. But yeah, but when it comes to, it's just traveling. So I'm going to I go to London, and then I think me and my girlfriend are going to go to Bosnia, Sarajevo. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Then to like Mostar, and then to Dubrovnik in Croatia, which is also King's Landing, which I'm super excited about.
Wow.
And then to Montenegro, just because it looks beautiful on Instagram. And then I actually go back to London because we have our end of the season like team party trip, whatever, in London. And then one of my friends, we decided to go to the World Cup. It's my dad's 60th this year, as well as his Christmas present. So we sent him to England for 5 days to see some of his friends, and then 5 days to the World Cup. And I said, "Oh shit, I'll join you at the World Cup."
Yeah.
So then one of my other friends that plays in Iceland, we reverse engineered it and said, okay, what's the easiest way to get to? They're like the cheapest way to get to Qatar. So the cheapest way to get to Qatar was through Cairo, Egypt. So I'm going to Cairo as well, just for a couple of days, going to go see the pyramids, and then off to Qatar. So that's those are the off-season plans at the minute, and then I go home and try and rebuild the money that I just spent.
Damn, that's awesome though. That is definitely, like you said, one of the cool things about like that proximity to all these amazing places to get to see. That is super cool.
Yeah, I mean, counting on I've been to Marseille, I've been to Edinburgh, I've been to Budapest, to Prague, and there's one more, to Bologna, Italy, all for like under $40 round trip. So
yeah,
it was sick
you can't
experiences
beat
that I
that.
would never trade for anything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Any prediction for the U.S. in the World Cup this year?
Oh man, I hope my boy Christian starts to get some minutes under Graham Potter,
Yeah.
because we need him in some form. But I'm predicting that England will face plant. So I'm hoping that happens against the U.S. I'm trying to get tickets to that game, but for the life of me, it's going to cost me an arm and a leg if I end up getting some.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that the U.S. I'm thinking we'll get second. I think we'll beat Iran. I hope we better beat Wales. Then it may come down to the England game. So I'm really hoping for some success. One of my friends, Walker, will be in the squad, and then I'm hoping my other friend Eric, who plays in France, will be in the squad. So selfishly hoping they go to be able to watch them, but also for them to give me tickets. So yeah, so I'm hoping. I think there's a lot of good players in this U.S. team. I'm just hoping they can come together and string some results together. We've got some quality guys playing in some top leagues and top teams across the world. So, it was obviously very disappointing for them to miss in 2018. I think it was a pivotal moment in U.S. football that really could have started an upward trend in the U.S. Obviously football is trending upwards in the U.S., but like at that time in 2018, all of my friends who played American football and basketball and all that were all on FIFA and naming guys that I didn't even know who the hell. Like, oh, did you see this player? It's like, no, who's that? It's like, oh, I got him on FIFA. Like he's on my ultimate team. So there was so much interest building, in the sport that I would have loved if the U.S. could have made it in 2018. I think it could have really put the sport on a different trajectory. But hopefully that's the case this year, and then obviously the World Cup in 2026 in North America. So I think it's a pivotal time for U.S. football, and I'm hoping it goes in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm hoping so for sure, because I think that 2026 World Cup could be a big deal if we, like you said, can kind of continue on that trajectory. I'm slightly nervous just based on the past couple of results that the U.S. has had.
Yeah.
It makes me a little bit I haven't seen a ton kind of from an attacking perspective or, just kind of creativity going forward. But, everybody kind of, it's a different element when you show up and the lights are on. It's the World Cup. Like, you have to bring
Yeah,
everything that you've got. So hopefully.
yeah, and the tough bit is like just the amount of players circulating in and out of the squad and like
Mm,
of the pool, like Greg hasn't really pulled together like, he did maybe in this last window, but he hasn't pulled together like the best group that we have, the best 26 that we have, that play well together and everything. So, it's again an issue of having a plethora of options, but I'm hoping he can find the right combination of 26 uh, for the World Cup. So we'll see.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you too long because I know shortly you're going to have to get off to training yourself. But I greatly appreciate you taking
I
some time
am.
to chat with us, and I'm sure the audience will enjoy this one as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's been a blast. Hopefully, I didn't talk in too many circles.
No, not at all, man. All right, that's going to do it for the episode this week. Thank you once again to Kyle for taking some time out of his day to share his story with all of you out there. I really appreciate it. That was a really super interesting one, and it's cool to see someone like him now have, a lot of success, and it will be exciting to follow his career in the coming years to see kind of what happens and where the game takes him. Thank you to all of you out there who have shown your continued support, who have continued to listen to these episodes. I really appreciate it. If you would like to continue to further that support, I would love it if you could join the Patreon page, as that's a great way to support the show. If you listen to this podcast, if you go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube as well, so you can watch the visual, that would be also greatly appreciated as we try and grow on that platform a little bit as well. So thanks to all you out there again, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.